Hey guys, Tammy here. And this week, I want to talk to you about when you resent your co parent. Now, I know that I have a lot of clients that say, I keep doing all these things. I keep trying to help. I keep trying to make it easier. And the other person just doesn't seem to be grateful at all for all this effort that I'm putting in. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit like on this video and also subscribe to the channel so you get notified as new episodes are released. Let me just say, this idea for this topic today came from a really great discussion and coaching session that I had with one of my clients where she's just really, really struggling with this issue of resentment. So I think you're going to get a lot of really good pearls of wisdom out of this, and it's really going to help. This level of resentment, I think, really comes up a lot in the narcissistic relationship dynamic. And I know that I talk about that a lot. It's typical that when you're a narcissist, that you're in a relationship with someone who is a giver, who's who's more empathetic. The narcissist is kind of more of the taker person of the relationship, and the other person is usually the giver. And so that's probably, if you're like me, the realm that you fall into, where I'm kind of a people pleaser by nature. I like to be needed. I am a giver in most of my relationships. And, it's nice when you actually have somebody who's also a giver. Then you're kind of falling over each other trying to see who's giving the most. And that's kind of how my marriage to Thomas was, which was very nice and was a huge shift from my first marriage, where my ex-husband was really the taker in the relationship. And I was the one constantly trying to make life easier for him. So it shouldn't be any surprise to us that post-relationship, post-breakup, post-divorce, whichever situation you're in, that this dynamic can continue, and it can really build up the resentment in us. And when that resentment builds up, what happens a lot of times is this is where we start to have conflict. This is where things can start to explode because we're not really dealing with how we feel. And we're just thinking, oh, we're past the relationship. We've broken up, whatever. I don't love that person. I'm over it. Therefore, I don't have any emotional issues or any reasons why I can't interact with them. And I think this is one of the biggest fallacies of trying to move past a relationship that people have, because they think if they no longer have romantic feelings towards that person, that they're over it. But there's a whole dynamic that goes into that narcissistic codependent relationship. And it's not something that you can just go, oh, I'm through this relationship, so I'm over this type of relationship pattern. In actuality, what typically happens if we don't deal with the reasons that we are behaving the way we are in relationships, we will just duplicate that process and get with a similar type of person again. One of the first ways that I start working with clients on this issue is by reframing. And I'm not a therapist, but this is a technique that I learned from my therapist, and it was very, very helpful to me. And so I want to share what reframing actually is. So the first thing that you focus on in reframing is an issue like, why are you doing what you're doing? So you say you're doing these things to make life easier and the other person is ungrateful. Well, why are we doing that? So let's say that we're changing the schedule, or we're accommodating schedule changes frequently, and we start to resent that. Or we're driving a certain amount and we start to resent that, or whatever type of issue it is. In the big picture, and you may say to me, well, Tammy, I'm driving that far because the court ordered me to. Okay, I get it. But if you're having a resentment around it, then you're attaching more meaning to it than just the court ordered you to do this. The reason ultimately that we're doing these things is for our children, right? Isn't that the whole reason that you do what you do? Isn't that the whole reason that you do try to make accommodations for the other parent or change things or do things? Because ultimately you feel like it's best for your child. And it may not even be that you feel like that change is better for your child, but maybe you feel like not fighting with the other parent is better for the other child. That's a form of it, right? Giving in and avoiding the conflict so that your child doesn't have to endure the stress of his or her parents having conflict is a form of doing things for your child. But what we tend to start to do is we frame it in the context of, I'm doing all these things for the other parent and the other parent is ungrateful. Well, that's going to breed resentment because you no longer have a romantic relationship with this person. This is no longer your person in the world, right? And so that's going to make you feel resentful of them. But if we can keep it in the context of, look, this is a choice that I'm making of my own free will to do this thing because I know this is better for my child and this outcome is going to be better for my child. And once you start to look at it from that perspective, most of us as parents would do most anything for our children within reason. If you can start to look at it within that context, you're not going to feel the level of resentment that you feel right now towards that other parent. The other thing that feeds resentment is our own expectations. And I know that I'm guilty of this, of doing things in a relationship, not just in a romantic relationship, but in relationship with my children and my parents and, everybody in my life, where at one point in my life, it was like, well, I did these things for you, and now you're not willing to do anything to help me with this when I have a crisis, or when I need help with something. And that's called having an expectation of someone. And you are not going to be able to have happy, positive relationships when you have a certain level of expectation or when you're doing things just because you expect something else in return. Now, I don't want to misconstrue this too much because I think we do have obligations in relationships. And I think there are a certain amount of expectations. A lot of times what happens is we're now past the relationship, we've broken up or we've divorced or whatever the case may be, and we're still putting expectations on that relationship of, oh, I'm expecting you to do things for me because I've done things for you. But at this point, that's not the type of relationship that you have with this person. You cannot have the same expectation of this person that you did before. You can't expect something in return. This is not somebody you're any longer in a relationship with. And the more that you have those expectations and you allow your resentment to build, the more damage it does to your co-parenting relationship and the more conflict you ultimately have, which hurts you. Because then you have no peace in your life. You have no tranquility. You have no ability to focus on your own world and the life that you want to build for you. You're stuck in this cycle with this person, and it all started with your expectation. The other thing I find with the resentment is that it usually means you're not to the other side of this relationship. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, no, Tammy. I do not want to be with this person. I am totally over it. I am past it. I am so far past done. I'm lapping it for the second time, right? To quote the Reba sitcom, that's one of the lines that she says in it. And I love that show, which you'll know if you've listened to us for a while. But we think we're done. And we think we're done because we no longer have romantic feelings towards the other person. But being caught in the loop of this relationship isn't just about romantic feelings. This is also about the unfairness of the situation. This is also about the abuse that we feel like we've gone through. This is also about how our dreams have been destroyed a lot of times in the breakup of this relationship. I mean, if you got married, you didn't walk down the aisle thinking, oh, well, this will last until we get divorced. Right? I mean, I didn't. That's not what I was thinking. And yet that it was how long it lasted the first time. One of the things that you have to understand is whatever it was that harmed you in the relationship, whatever it was that felt unfair to you, that can still sit with you as resentment, even if you tell me you no longer love this person or want to be in a relationship with them. So, next question becomes, how do you get to the other side? Right? All right, Tammy, great. I have this resentment. I'm dealing with it. I'm sometimes not dealing with it in the best way, but ultimately, how do I get to the other side of it? For me, I think one of the very first steps was to start to understand why my ex-husband was the way he was. And I think that for me, this was a little bit easier maybe than for most people because my ex-husband and I have known each other since we were 11 and 13. And so I was there for a lot of his childhood and teenage years and growing up and whatever. His teen years, I guess he was 13 when we met. So his teen years and seeing the things he went through and the struggles with his parents' divorce and him not having a relationship with his father and all these different things that happened to him that I know contributed to him having these types of coping mechanisms in his relationship skills. And you can have sympathy for that. But when you get to the point where you're no longer in the relationship and you've broken up and you're trying to co-parent, you have to understand that this relationship is toxic for you. So regardless of why they're the way they are, because sometimes we're overly empathetic, right? And we make excuses and we still accommodate after the end of the relationship. But you have to get to the point where you can draw the boundary because this relationship is still toxic for you. And if you're having the interaction and you're, doing things to accommodate them and make changes and all this different kind of stuff, which I think you should try to co-parent as cooperatively as you possibly can. But that's not the same thing as compromising yourself and your own emotional well-being for that other person. You aren't required to do that. And that's the part that for me took many years. In order for you to heal from this relationship and move past it, then you need that time and that space. And you can't get it if you're still having this level of interaction. You just can't have it. Now, down the road, will you be able to? Yeah, maybe. Maybe you can cooperatively co-parent at that level. Later on, when you really are past the relationship, you will be able to have this level of interaction and you'll have complete indifference about it. You'll have equanimity, to use a Buddhist word, right? You won't feel any of those emotions around it. It'll be like, whatever. This person said this, they attacked me, they said something negative, they insulted me, they hung up on me, they did whatever. It'll be like, I don't really care. I don't need to call them back. I don't need to try to prove myself to this person. I don't need to try to justify myself through text messages or, parenting app messages or whatever your communication preference is. You won't even feel the need to do that because you won't care. You won't care what they think. You won't care what they're doing. So on some level, if you're experiencing resentment, anger, frustration, hurt, any of those things, you still care on some level. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't have those emotions. You would be completely indifferent. So, how do we get to the other side? How do you solve the problem? This is what I always like to ask at the end of it, right? We talk about all these problems. We talk about all the issues. How do we really get to the other side? And, I've told you guys that I'm a huge personal development junkie, and I was in a training this week, and anyway, so there was a lot of people. It was like a live free thing that I did, whatever. And so Jay Shetty spoke at this, and I don't know if you guys know who Jay Shetty is, but he has this fantastic podcast about living life on purpose. And he has all these great guests that are really interesting, and some of them, celebrities and whatnot. And you kind of get to dig a little deeper and find out like things they struggle with on a personal level. So it's a really good podcast. It's very interesting. If you've never heard it, you should go check it out. But one of the things that he said in this training that I was in is he said, there are 3 C's to solve any problem. Any problem you have, there are 3 C's to solve it. One of them is coaching, which is what I do, what I help people with, right? The coaching part of it. And then consistency, right? You have to apply it consistently. I have had clients that I've worked with that come back a year or 2 later and they go, Tammy, I'm right back to suffering and I don't know why. And I say to them, are you doing this thing that we talked about? Well, no. Are you doing this thing that we talked about? Well, no. Are you doing this thing that we talked? Well, no. Okay, well, you're right back to square one. Then you need a refresher on your coaching. You need somebody to come alongside you and remind you. So if we can't internalize it and keep doing it and doing it consistently, we're going to have this ebb and flow, right? Where sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not when we're not applying things consistently. And the third C is community. And this is one of the things I love about my group coaching programs is I have a program for moms and a program for dads. And it's fantastic because you don't just get my perspective, you also get the benefit of all the other perspectives and also what's working in their situations, what's helping them move forward, what's working for them in court in front of the judges. And you get all this extra input from the community that you could not have gotten from just one-on-one coaching. And I've had this experience myself. And this is why we go to seminars and go through trainings and do all these types of things, is because that sense of community, it empowers you, it emboldens you, it gives you confidence. It makes you feel like you can do this. You can handle this person in your life. You can deal with it, and you can still create a life you love for you and your kids. So that, my friend, is the solution. If you'd like to learn more about my coaching services, please go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. I'd love to talk to you and find out what program I might have that could better support you on this journey. So please go there, check it out, and I will see you guys next time. We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.